Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition, exciting edition, actually, of Calvary 165. And the 165 represents Calvary's 165th anniversary, doing ministry for 165 years.
That is amazing.
That is amazing. And our guest today is J. Earlene Carr. I am very excited to have a conversation with you, Ms. Carr. So the purpose of this, and I like to repeat it for every episode, I like it. I really like the fact that Reverend Wright was inspired to have these conversations done for the purpose of reintroducing members to one another, and in some cases, obviously, because people come and people go over the years, introducing somebody, essentially for the first time, for what purpose? So that people just get to know each other better. And so we always refer to Calvary as our church what? Family, right? Our church
Right,
family.
correct, yes.
And so
yes.
families know each other.
Right.
Families know each other. And so if the only time that we're going to invest in one another for relational connectivity Sunday mornings, that's kind of a superficial surface level. And so this can be a model, I think, of how folks just get to become better acquainted with one another over time. Does that make sense?
It makes perfectly good sense.
Well, great. So we're just going to have a conversation. Some folks may happen to be tuning in, but we're talking to each other. And so, first of all, I introduce you as J. Earlene Carr. I have always known you as Earlene Carr. I wonder what this J stands for. Is that like the best kept secret in Ithaca, or are you willing to publicly reveal it?
Well, it may have been the best kept secret previously, but as you get older, you don't have that many secrets.
Okay.
So I would say, no, it's not really the best kept secret anymore. I actually was named after my father. My father's name was Joseph Earl. And so my name is really Josephine Earlene. And he decided that after he had done that, maybe it wasn't the right thing to do because they might call me Little Joe because they called him Joe. So he decided to call me by my middle name, which he regretted to the end of his life.
Really?
Because he was afraid people would call me Little Joe, as I said, and he instead called me Earlene. And everyone then didn't even know anything about Josephine, which is my legal first name and I have to use on legal papers.
I understand.
So he said, I regret that to the day I would die.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I would just like to add that, I used to watch Bonanza growing up, and Little Joe was pretty popular.
Indeed so. And that's dating you a little bit, too.
Absolutely. I do not mind saying I am 68 and feeling great. So,
Good for you.
all right. So one of the things that we like to do in these conversations is just get a sense of where your faith journey just kind of started. A lot of us talk about, growing up and those types of things. Some people, for various people, it's just at different times along the continuum. And so just kind of to give you a heads up, I want to talk a little bit about your faith journey, where it began, what some of your inspirations were, how long you've been at Calvary, what are some of the ministries you've been involved in while you've, during your time here, and other things.
Yeah.
You're an educator,
Right.
and I can't wait to learn more about that. I want to even talk about Project Moving Up, right?
Indeed.
So let's just
indeed.
have a conversation here. So in terms of your faith journey, where would you like to start that?
I think it really started as I was a young lady. My parents were faithful churchgoers and never usually missed a Sunday. So it was expected and demanded that I go along with them, unless I was very, very sick. So usually I went to church every Sunday, and it would start with Sunday school. I would go to Sunday school first, and then I would actually go upstairs to church. So I had a double dose of it. I can vividly remember when I was baptized. I was shivering. I was so scared. I knew the understanding was that I believed in the Lord and that he was my Savior and that I was going to be baptized to confirm all of this. And so there we sat, all my cousins and my friends sat on a bench with white robes on, shivering all because we were scared to death. And then we each got up there And when I got up and hit the water, I thought, oh my, they must have icicles in here. It was freezing cold. But I made it through. My mom was there to offer towels and things and go downstairs and help me finish dressing for the church service.
Let me ask you. You talk about your cousins being there and so on and so forth. Talk a little bit about. Are you a native Ithacan?
No, actually, I'm a Philly girl. Philly girl, including Philadelphia cheesesteaks. Yes.
Oh, right.
Absolutely. Right.
So you grew up in Philadelphia?
I did. I was born and raised in Philly. And my parents were both from Virginia. So we were on summer vacations, we would from time to time make the trip down to Virginia to visit all the relatives. And that was quite a trip because there were many relatives to visit and we had to see them all or else they would feel slighted. So we would do that on some Sundays. On some vacations. I vividly remember going over the bridge. It was, you kept going up and up and up and up. And when I could see the mount of the bridge occurring, I'd say, uh-oh, Dad, it's time for the bridge. And he'd say, I know, and I don't like it any better than you, and I'm driving.
So where's this bridge? Between Philly and Virginia?
I'm trying to remember the name of the bridge. But
what state? I'm just curious.
It is going it's Virginia.
Oh, in
I think you're in Virginia at that time, or it's crossing over into Virginia.
Woodrow Wilson Bridge, maybe?
No, it's not. No. Okay. You know what? After this conversation is over, I will certainly think of the name of the bridge.
So were you afraid because of the height of the bridge?
Yes. The scary part was that you could see how far up you were going to go. That was really nerve-wracking.
I can imagine.
And so Dad would drive and wouldn't say a word. Mom would be sitting there. She wouldn't say anything either. And my eyes were bigger than big as we climbed up higher and higher and higher to get to the top, like the peak of the bridge. And then once we got there, would slowly come down. And then you would be on flat territory for the rest of the bridge until it ended. I'm trying to remember.
So I'm just curious, do you like amusement parks? Do you ride on roller coasters?
I know. Oh, no. No, all my kids love amusement parks, and they love to ride on roller coasters. I do not.
I can imagine, based on the way you've described
exactly.
that experience. There you go.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Fear of heights.
Yeah. Right. It is so interesting how early experiences in life can really kind of have a lasting impression.
Indeed.
And manifest in various ways.
Right.
So you grew up in Philadelphia. Your parents were avid churchgoers. And was it a Baptist church? I'm just curious.
It was. It was Calvary Baptist Church.
Really?
Indeed.
See?
Yes. It's amazing.
That is amazing.
You just never know where you're going to end up, but it is amazing. Yes.
So you grew up in Philadelphia.
Yes.
And did you go away to school? Did you go to school in the Philadelphia area?
Well, actually, I grew up in the outskirts, the suburbs of Philadelphia. I was born in Philadelphia at Mercy Douglas Hospital, which of course no longer exists. And my parents soon after moved out to the suburbs. And so I moved to Ardmore, Pennsylvania.
Ardmore. I've heard of Ardmore.
Yeah, and I went to school there. And I finished my high school career there and then entered college. I was ready for college.
So away from Pennsylvania, or I'm just curious?
You know what? This is the funny thing. I always wanted to go to Michigan State. Now, if you said to me, why did you want to go to Michigan State? I could not tell you. I have no idea. I must have seen Michigan State on a banner, or I saw Michigan State, it's the university itself, but I wanted to go there.
Okay.
And so I applied to only 2 colleges. One was Michigan State, and the other was Penn State.
Okay.
My dad said to me, now you understand that when you go out of state, you have to pay much more money. And I said, yes, but Dad, I really want to go there. And he said, all right, we'll cut a deal. The deal will be this. If you get accepted at Michigan State and you don't get accepted on campus, because that was a big thing those days.
I see.
They had lots of people going to college, and therefore they couldn't have all on the main campus. So they had these sub-campuses, and you would go there for like 2 years. and then you would go to the main campus to finish up your college career. So he said, if you get accepted at Michigan State and you don't get accepted at Penn State, then I will agree to having you go to Michigan State, even though it's far away. And I was an only child.
Oh, my.
So I said, okay, that's a deal, Dad. So every day I'd look to see the postman come and put letters in the mailbox, and I would race down there because I wanted to be the first there, and to see if there's a letter from Penn State or was there a letter from my favorite, Michigan State. So one day I raced down to the mailbox, opened it up, and there was this letter from Michigan State saying that they had accepted me on campus. And I said, woo-wee. So I said, Dad, guess what? I've got accepted at Michigan State. He said, okay, what about Penn State? I said, I haven't heard anything from Penn State yet. You know, I think that I won't get accepted on campus because they're full. I think they're going to accept me at one of their off-campus schools for 2 years. And then I don't want to go. He said, well, we agreed you wouldn't have to go. So the next day, the very next day, I got another letter in the mailbox from the Pennsylvania State University. I said, okay, let's hope it doesn't accept me. So I opened the letter, and it says, you are accepted on main campus. I said, that's it. That did it in. That's it. I know where I have to go. And I said, Dad, I got the letter from Penn State today. He said, oh, that's good. And did they accept you? And I said, indeed they did. He said, woo-wee, we're going to Penn State. So that's how I ended up at Penn State for 4 years.
I did not know you were going to Penn State. Both
No.
Michigan State and Penn State, obviously, phenomenal schools. In fact, well, I was just going to say my across the street neighbor now is a Nittany Lion, Penn State, big fan. But you are probably the only person I have ever met who was hoping not to get accepted at a school that they had applied to.
Exactly.
That is
Oh,
so
I was kind of
interesting.
spoiled, you know. Being an only child, I was spoiled.
I see.
So my not getting accepted did not work out.
I understand.
And I went and had the best 4 years of my life.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that is so awesome. Now, I'm really curious to know, because we're going to talk a little bit more in a little bit about your career. But definitely want to talk about your connection to Calvary, but were you an education major? I'm curious to know.
I eventually was an education major. The interesting thing was this: when Dad, Mom, and I talked about what will you major in at Penn State, I said, well, there's a little problem here. And Dad said, well, what's the problem? You got accepted. And I said, yes, but what I really wanted to be was not at Penn State, because the one thing that I wanted to be in my life that's not a major there. And he said, well, what is it? I said, I want to be a nurse. He said, what? A nurse when you're afraid of sickness and blood? I said, well, yes, that's true. But he said, tell me truthfully, why is it you want to be a nurse? And I said, okay, I'll fess up here. I really want to be a nurse because they have gorgeous uniforms. They're lovely. They're all starchy, and they're navy blue. And then there's a little hat, that perky little hat that fits on your head, and you wear those. And I said, and I would live near Bryn Mawr Hospital. So if there was anybody in the hospital, you couldn't go in because you're too young. So I would sit in the car and I'd watch these nurses come swiftly walking by with their white stockings and their swishy, robes, not robes, but a cape, beautiful capes, all starched up. And I said, that's for me. That's what I want to be. And Dad said, I would not give one nickel to give you an education to be a nurse because you can't stand illness. And I said, Dad, I think I would overcome it. He said, I don't think so. You're going to Penn State. Now let's figure out what you're going to do. So that's how that ended.
Well, anyone who knows you immediately would not be surprised that you were attracted to a nice, attractive uniform because you are stylish and have always, and we're going to talk about that. You've emceed fashion shows and so on and so forth. So being just incredibly stylish for as long as I've known you, I am not the least bit surprised that you were enamored, let's say, with folks in very nice uniforms. So we're definitely going to talk about your education service in this community. But so let's talk about when you came to Calvary. I came in 1980, and over the years I just forget who was here and whatnot. But so when did you come to Calvary?
Actually, we moved to Ithaca from, well, we weren't in Philadelphia at the time. We moved to Ithaca from, well, we were in Pennsylvania. That's where we were. Because we moved from where we were to New Jersey as a married family. And then from New Jersey back to Pennsylvania because Carson was at Cheney State University, which still exists, along with Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Cheney State and Lincoln?
He wasn't in both, but they both exist.
Right, I
He
see.
was at Cheney State.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we moved to Ithaca because he had a position at Cornell.
Mm-hmm.
It was the HEO, one of the HEOP
program.
Yep,
Uh-huh.
one of those programs.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved there. And after we moved there, being a church-going person, I started looking around for church.
Mm-hmm.
And we had loads of students because we were in walking distance from Cornell. So they felt free to walk right over.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there wasn't one meal that we had as a family without somebody ringing the doorbell. And it was a student looking for a free handout. And I can't tell you how many times I'd look in the cupboards just because I wasn't expecting anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd look in the cupboards and I'd say, the cupboards are bare. I mean, there's not much here. What can I have in addition to what I cooked already? I mean, so every day went that way. And it got to be a joke. I would say, well, everybody, it's dinner time. And the kids would say, and are students here yet? and surely, in a few minutes, the doorbell would ring, and there would be 1, 2, or 3 or 4 students.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we loved Ithaca. And as I said, I started looking for a church home. And the students knew of Calvary and said, you know what, you need to go to Calvary.
Wow.
A lot of us go there. So it's a good church. You should go. So I took them up on that, and I did come here. And at that time, Reverend McLean was the minister.
Mm-hmm.
And, I liked the church and continued in this church and never changed, continued to be here. And Reverend McLean got to know me better and then said, would you like to do announcements? Would you do announcements? And I said, what? Sure. What do you want me to do? He said, well, I'll have the announcements all written out, and you just, greet everybody and give them the announcements for the day or the week or whatever. And I said, okay, that's fine. Now, the problem with that was I had my youngest child by that time, and it was the son. And he would not stay in the pews while I came up here to give announcements. It was a catastrophe. Every Sunday, I'd say, I want you to stay. Mom will be right back. And he'd say, no! And we'd start. So finally, Reverend McLean said, just bring him up. So I said, okay, it's maybe easier than it sounds. So I would bring him up, and he'd have a teddy bear with him. And I don't think the people heard anything I said in announcements. They were so busy watching him with this teddy bear. And he would stand right beside me and not move too far away with his teddy bear. I'd finish the announcements, and then we would come down. Well, one Sunday, Sister Gould was feeling sorry for me, said, I will take him. Don't worry about it. I'll take him downstairs. You do the announcements. When you finish the announcements, you come to the door and get him, and he'll be fine. I said, Sister Gould, I don't think that it's going to work that way. And she said, oh, it will. Watch, just watch. So I said, okay. So she took him downstairs, and I could hear him screaming and yelling while I was trying to do announcements. Poor people up here. I was trying to get louder than he, and without deafening him or them. So we ended up finishing that, and that was the last time I put that on poor Sister Gould, and she never asked again. It was the end of her babysitting days for this kid.
Do you remember, was that before 1980 or after?
That was before
I
1980.
thought so because I remember you doing doing announcements.
Right.
What you did with flair and style and all of those other wonderful things. But I don't remember that part. So that
Right.
would have happened before
Right.
Glenn and I came here in 1980.
Yeah, he had gotten older.
I
then.
see.
Yes, and no longer needed to accompany me up to the pulpit.
I see. So I want to talk a little bit. So was that the first area of active involvement here at Calvary?
Yes.
Because you've done a number of things over the years, and we're going to
Right.
talk about a little bit of those. But
Right.
before we do, it's not insignificant that the students on campus that were coming over, connecting with your family, told you about Calvary and said, it's a really good church, you should go there. I mean, I think that's really significant. Here we have students who are from various places across the country, if not the world, and connect with a church and become almost ambassadors, right?
Right.
For new people in the community. I say, here's where we go. We like it a lot, and we think you should come. I mean, that's really significant. And when we think about what it takes for a church to endure for 165 years,
Indeed.
right?
Indeed.
So that is just one of what I'm sure are many examples of the imprint or the footprint that Calvary not only has in this community, but how meaningful association with this church has been for people who come, in this case, college students who, in many cases, are only here for about 4 years or so.
Exactly.
Unless they're doing graduate work and this kind of thing, and here for years beyond that. But I think that is really significant, and really glad that you share that, because, again, it speaks to the significance of this church, the importance of its ministry, and how it impacts people so much so that they're even becoming ambassadors and recruiters.
Right.
That is really significant. So I remember you in various roles here. Making announcements is one. I've mentioned, I don't know how many, well, well, there was definitely a talent show, at least one. Not talent show, I'm sorry, fashion show.
The hat show.
Hat show, yes, exactly.
Right.
I remember that. Now, was it church secretary, church clerk?
Well, that's an interesting question because as I was thinking about that, I think it must have been that nobody could make up their mind what it was that I was to do. So it started out with what I would call church clerk. That's what I would call it. Even though I was giving announcements, greeting everybody, etc., it was church clerk. And then later, I think maybe, I don't know who was church secretary at the time, but whomever was church secretary maybe shifted over to another career or another thing that they did for the church, and they asked me to be the church secretary. So I did then the church greeting, and then I attended the meetings and did the church secretary, and I took the minutes.
Took the minutes, I remember
And then
well.
Sister Gould was kind enough to take them from me, and she would type them up. And, you know, and then she would print them out and then distribute them so that everybody had a copy, that wanted a copy of the church minutes. So that's how that began, and that continued.
Now, this is Sister Lisa Gould you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay. That's so interesting because we did an interview with her. She and I did an interview about a week or so ago. And so she was the one who took your little son downstairs.
Indeed.
And also offered, you know, assisted in the way that you just described. But that's good.
She was a sweet person and a kind person.
Well, that's good.
We didn't, I don't think we quelled that. She's still that way.
Oh, still very much so. Absolutely, very much so. I enjoyed the conversation with her. She talked about some of her own experiences. So, so this is now. Well, I came here 42 years ago. So you've been here well over 4 decades.
Right. A little while. Right.
So Calvary has been significant. Has had and continues to have a significant role in who you are as a person and your anchoring here in the community.
Yes, indeed, yes. I mean, I think that during my stay here, I've seen at least 7 or 8 ministers come and go. And fortunately, the current minister, Reverend Wright, had lasting power. And he was young, younger than the others. And everybody said, oh my, that's a young kid up there. And, but that young kid blossomed
Absolutely.
and matured. And he's now not an old man, but a young man that's still doing right by the Lord.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amen. 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 So, over the years, can you think of individuals who may have impacted you in particular ways or influenced you in certain ways? I mean, you talk about announcements. I also remember Vivian Morgan doing announcements. I don't know if that was after you.
I think that was before me,
That was
and I
before.
think I took her place. Yes, I think.
And being here for well over 40 years, oh my goodness, I think about Mother Ella Cunningham, Mrs. Anita Reed, Mrs. Holton, who used to chair the what was the Easter teas or
Right. I
something.
think yes.
Remember?
I vividly. I remember that. Yes.
So now of course I just mentioned women, and then obviously Deacons Lloyd and Deacon Blanton and Deacon Holton and Deacon Hardaway and all of them. So I'm always curious, particularly for people who've been here for several decades and have seen some of the members who've long since gone to be with the Lord, just if there was anyone in particular that you may have been connected with or may have impacted you in certain ways.
I don't know that I was particularly personally connected with them, but I was amazed at their strength and at the fact that they were such good role models. And they were a good role model for me because they showed me this is how you respond in church and church-like activities. These are the kinds of things you do. And as I watched them, they did many, many things. Mother Reed I remember her vividly, more than any of the others, because she was such a strong churchgoer, and she left such an impact on us. This is how you respond in the church as a lady. You do these things, and you don't ask why or when or how. You just make sure that you are available and that you do the job to the best of your ability.
Amen.
So that's what she represented. And also, Mrs. McLean was a strong woman
Yes.
for the church, a strong first lady. And I think that for those that came after her, she exemplified this is how you respond as a first lady. I mean, she kind of was a training grounds for all these other people that would come after her. And what a great job she did.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've had some amazing role models here, and
We have.
people whose walk with the Lord was rock solid, right? And over 165 years. Of course, if we go back, 40 years or so, would have been about 125 years prior to some of these folks. But I'm sure that there were folk who were to them what they became to so many of us.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And to me, that just is a further testament to the strength, the vitality, the resiliency, the steadfastness of a church that is now, celebrating 165 years in a community.
Correct.
That's touched so many lives.
Correct. Yeah, and there was strong, and there still is, strong determination to get the job done.
Absolutely.
And not to get the job done for ourselves, but to get the job done for the Lord. And that we believe in this, and that this is the way it should be. And I think this is how you get things that you can't imagine getting done, they do somehow get done. People may take their last penny and say, this will help, and put it in the serving tray. So, I think there's a lot of camaraderie here, but it's spiritual camaraderie. I mean, I don't think there are people who have been here for many, many years who would not grant the wish of somebody who needed them. If they were called and were asked to do something, even though it might put them out a little bit, they would rise to the occasion and they would do it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important when you think about the spirit and the knowledge and the base that we have here to believe in God as a Savior.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. So I want to go back now and talk a little bit about your involvement in the community. And again, one of the purposes of these conversations is for folks to get to know each other a little better. So I distinctly remember Project Moving Up is one of the things I will always associate you with. Why don't you tell the audience what that was?
Well, Project Moving Up was sponsored by the Ithaca City School District. It was given hope that it would exist for many years after it could be seen that the minority students in particular struggled and didn't have enough help and didn't have the wherefore to know how to get this help. And so there was a group of people who brought this to the attention of the school board and said, we need to find help in the community for these young men and women. And not only black men and women, but also Asian men and women. I mean, we didn't say you can't come in. It didn't matter who you were. We were going to provide that help because you were there and you needed the help.
Right.
So it started on that premise. And then we needed a place to exist in. And so Southside Community Center rose to the occasion. And so night after night after night, we were there with students who somehow made it down from Cornell or made it down from Ithaca College to be tutors free for these students. And we would make sure that they got home somehow or another. I transported many students in my car. Not only the students who went to Project Moving Up, but the tutors who helped them out. And as I think back, some of these students today are powerfully successful. And it's absolutely amazing. And they remember Project Moving Up. And many of them say, if it hadn't been for this help, I wouldn't be where I am.
Exactly.
You know, so we had one of the Smiley young men who came every single night, and he poured over his books, and it wasn't easy, but he's doing well now. And so he attributes it to, a lot of it at least, to the fact that he was a member of Project Moving Up, and he was there and got help that he needed and was able to go to school the next day with his homework done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So was this, I'm trying to situate it in time. So we're in 2022. Was this in the late 19s? It was before 2000.
It
Well,
was.
before 2000,
I would
right.
say it was in the 80s. 80s and
right.
early 90s, you know, and then the money kind of, dwindled out, and Project Moving Up was no longer. But it is, it is something that is always needed.
Absolutely.
And if I looked back on it and looked back on the fact that we protected those students that came, and we nurtured them, and we gave them what they needed, which was attention and help for their work, we would be in better shape. So this was something that could arise again because, with COVID-19 and with the students getting work done at home and missing out on a lot that could have been done in school, we don't know what kinds of times we're going to return to.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up, because I have heard references. First of all, I remember Project Moving Up, and have heard references in recent times as people talk about ways that we within the community, and the school is obviously part of the community, but some of the organizations within the community in whatever configurations need to be providing the types of services and supports that Project Moving Up provided. And I have specifically heard in recent years people refer to like Project Moving Up, right? So you all were essentially the gold standard or the platinum standard, I would say, of how to, at a grassroots community level, augment what is happening within the schools, recognizing, quite frankly, schools can't do it alone.
Exactly.
And we have to be able to provide some educational support services, academic support services, personal growth and development services, right, to help students be able to access education successfully, which I can assure you that those needs still exist. And you talk
Yeah.
about the impact of COVID and the interruptions in learning and the adjustments that some students are having, some of the challenges of reacclimating to the social settings and social norms of classrooms and structures and stuff like that. It's been a hard year. It's been a hard year right here in this community, not only, well, at all levels, the primary
Exactly.
levels and the secondary levels. So it's interesting. So let me let me form a question here. I want to, so we're talking about, let's talk generally about what role do you see, when we talk about community organizations, what role, if any, do you see that churches can play in supporting the educational aspirations of young children in our community?
That's a good question because there's a need. There's
There's great
always a
need.
need to help out kids, no matter how young they are or how old they are. They still have that need to get help. And I would say that even though Southside sufficed as the time that it did for the project moving up, that churches can help out now by probably setting up some kind of a way students can come here and get some help. The college students already come, and so if we could then somehow get it organized so that the students in high school and middle school and elementary school who needed help could come certain days a week, and some of these college students that already attend this church could be helpers, that would be a good start out. And I think that's what people are asking for, because nobody realizes the impact, the devastating impact that COVID-19 had on kids who had to stay home and learn from from their computers.
Yeah, and I know that over the years, and perhaps even in more recent years, Calvary has recognized the need for us as a church to be involved in supporting the educational aspirations of children. And if I'm not mistaken, has had some type of relationship with BJM right up the street. So in addition to on occasion, maybe a few days a week, having some things here, maybe even help making sure that as we talk about opportunities within the community, that people who may be inclined, whether they're retired teachers or educators or just somebody who may not even have any formal credentials in education, may be working in some other area or profession, as part of the congregation, who want to be, to mentor a child or go to one of the places where there's regularly scheduled academic support, and just say, you know what, I can't be here every day, but I can be here twice a week. You can get 2 hours out of me, twice a week, 4 hours a week. So, but I was really looking forward to chatting with you, because as an educator and just knowing that you were going to bring up some of the things that you did, because these are critical times, critical issues right now. And one of the other things that when we talk about churches, we're talking generally here. Obviously, Calvary is part of this whole big picture. But I think within our faith communities, and quite frankly, particularly within the churches, the local churches surrounding us here, I think we all need to be much more informed about what's going on in our schools, and the needs and the significant impact, as you say, that COVID has had, and the challenges that is presenting. And so that's maybe I think that throughout our faith communities, plural, we probably need to do a better job of making sure that we elevate the conversations and the discussion, and first of all, the levels of awareness about the status of education in our communities, and how it's been interrupted and impacting some of the children and families and the anxiety issues that go along. We're seeing much higher levels of anxiety and things that are preventing some children from getting as much formalized education as they can because of challenges or as they need because of difficulties just being in a school environment. So many things. Didn't mean to get off on a major tangent on
No,
that.
that's fine. I mean, because one of the things that we begin to realize more and more now as we look at the news on TV is the fact that there are so many more families, again, that don't have enough food to eat. So many kids, therefore, don't have what they need, the essentials that they need to be good students. If you have to worry about not having a meal at home and worry about the summers of not eating like you were, that impacts everything you could possibly learn and do. And so I think schools are now rising to the occasion of saying, we need to provide food for students who need it during the summer months too. And so they are beginning to do that. And that's a wise plan.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And also, within schools, I've heard for years that there's greater need for social workers and psychologists and this kind of thing, that the ratios of people available in those positions to the numbers of students is way too high. And so some of your challenges here. You talk about food insecurity and things like that, that makes me think about the critical importance of the food pantry that Calvary has here. And it so to connect the dots on this, we're talking about a number of different things where churches have the opportunities, as ours does, to meet the real needs of people within communities. Food pantries helping out to address issues of food insecurity. As we talked about, our church having a connection with BJM right up the road. The relevancy of church and relevancy, in order for ministry to be relevant, it clearly has to meet the needs of people that it is serving. And I think that the fact that Calvary is celebrating 165 years, every time I say that, it just blows me away.
It's amazing.
It tells me that over the years, this church has been relevant to folks in this community, and not just members. And not just members. Calvary has a brand in this community that is rock solid and has demonstrated resiliency over the years, even when we've had some challenges. And without going into the great details of some of those challenges, we had a major one, a few years ago, but our church surmounted that challenge. And you know why? Because think about it. Let's go back to what you were saying earlier about people who were here and modeled for us. What faith in action is, even in times of challenge, and in times that that can be uncertain. And so, but we have clearly been blessed to be connected to such a strong legacy in this community that was created by people who, and this is going to sound cliche. Well, I'd rather than go cliche and talk about walking the talk and this kind of thing. People who demonstrated faith in action.
Indeed, indeed, absolutely. And lots of these things wouldn't have happened without that.
Absolutely.
Without people believing and having a strong sense of believing that it too can happen.
Absolutely.
And that Calvary can be a part of making it happen. And that's essential of the essential thought of being a spiritual driven church. These kinds of things just have to exist.
They do. They absolutely do. So we have two services here at Calvary. We have the 9 o'clock service and the 11 o'clock service. And one of the reasons I so appreciate these kind of conversations is, sometimes we can fall into patterns and only go to 9 o'clock or only go to 11 o'clock.
Right.
And there's some folks in our family that we just don't know, right? And so one of the great benefits of these conversations is is helping to address that.
Right.
Anything that you would like to share or talk about that I haven't brought up?
We've talked about a lot of things, and that's good because, as you indicated, it helps others get to know us, and that, you know, by talking about our thoughts, our backgrounds, of where we were headed and where we are headed, that is part of who we are.
Absolutely.
That's part of the icing on the cake, so to speak. And so I think this is an essential role that we are now playing of introducing ourselves to others who may know our name but may not know much about us at all.
Absolutely.
You know, during church service, at the end of church services this past week, a lady came up to me and said, "How are the boys doing?" I had no idea that she knew who the boys were.
Wow.
And she did. She said, you know, they've grown, haven't they? And
Tall.
here again,
Really
here
tall.
again, I said, well, yeah, they have. And she carried on a conversation with me. But this is just one instance of the many times we think we know people, and we really don't know people as well as we should. And so this is a wonderful way to communicate who we are to others.
Absolutely.
Even others that are maybe not going to our church, but they may know us through the community, get to know us even better if they can visualize and they can hear what kinds of things we represent.
Absolutely.
So this is, as I said, essential. And one of the things I would hope, you know, one of the things Reverend had me do was for Black History Month, make sure that we reintroduced to the folks out there where our culture came from and who made history for us. Some strong women, some strong men who put up with so many punishing kinds of ordeals, and yet they carried on, and yet they walked on. So I think that we must be that way. We must also be followers, but we must not be afraid to walk over the cobbled stones and not be afraid to let our voices be heard, and not to be afraid to be a kind, saintly helper, because that's what our religion's all about.
All right, that was very, very well said, and thank you so much for the opportunity to have this conversation. And I learned some things about you, and I'm sure that others who are watching this will be saying exactly the same thing. So this has been another episode of Calvary 165. I guess has been guest. You're not a guest. I have had the pleasure of interviewing Mrs. J. Earlene Carr. Thank you for tuning in.